Great questions as always. And if you think my question's silly, I won't put that across to the top team of operatives. Do so. There is no such thing as a silly question. Believe you me. Call now 08000 855 949. Right, let's get to Emily's question in Emerson's Green. Emily, this is a great question because I think this is certainly over the last few weeks for a lot of people has been a real issue. I'm terrible at getting a good night's sleep. I often only get a few hours of broken sleep. How many hours do we actually need? And does it change with age? Well, Dr Lindsay Browning is a sleep expert. Lindsay, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Hi.
We have these things now on our phones that tell us how much sleep we've got, and somehow, well, I think we've already dealt with one of those things that they can, your phone can detect how deep you are asleep when it's beside your bed. I mean, really? Anyway,
yeah.
Well, I mean, actually, you should take your phone out of the bedroom in the first place, or am I missing something? But let's talk about this sort of 8 hours thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that true?
That's a great question. So that's really brilliant. So 8 hours is banded around a lot as the amount of sleep that an adult needs, but that's just because the recommendations from the National Sleep Foundation are that adults should get somewhere between 7 to 9 hours. Now, of course, 8 is the middle number of that. It doesn't mean that 8 is the perfect number, and we are all different. But interestingly, these recommendations have been around for 10 years, and they've just updated them in the last month or so.
Right.
And what they've said is that, yes, 7 to 9 hours is where that sort of Goldilocks zone of we're typically going to get the best benefits to people who sleep that much are the sort of generally the healthiest. However, there are a number of people who may well not need that much sleep. So for some people, it might be that 6 to 10 hours are appropriate for some people. So some people might only need 6 hours, for example. Other people might need as much as 10. So there isn't a number that we should all aim for. And if we do find ourselves falling into that trap because we read something in the newspaper, it can just be quite demoralizing.
Well, yeah,
because you can think that you're ranking yourself against something that isn't really true.
And that can present problems in its in its own right, isn't it? Can't it? Because I've had this happen in my various circles around the sun. I'm sure this has to you. You can't go to sleep. You get yourself wound up. Well, I'm not going to get my 7 or 8 hours now, and that's going to ruin it. Tomorrow's ruined because I haven't. And you think, well, no, it's not. When you actually think about it. So, how do you know whether you're a 6-hour person or a 10-hour person?
That's a great question.
How do you judge it?
So what I would recommend is that you give yourself a couple of weeks to kind of experiment, because there's no point thinking, well, I'll go to bed tonight and not set the alarm and see how long I sleep, because you might sleep for 12, 13, 14 hours. That doesn't mean that's how much sleep you need every night. You might be making up for a sleep deficit. If you're seriously sleep deprived, then you may have a huge catch-up night. That doesn't mean you need that all the time. So if you give yourself a couple of weeks where you aren't, heavily busy with work or other commitments, go to bed at a sort of fairly regular time and let yourself wake up a bit more naturally and keep a record of how much sleep you're getting on average.
Right.
And if you find that after 6 hours, generally you're sleeping about 6 hours and feeling good during the day, then maybe that's enough for you. If you find that when you actually do sleep for 8.5, 9 hours every day, you feel better, maybe you're someone who does need a bit more sleep. And sometimes, unfortunately, life doesn't allow us to get as much sleep as we would ideally need, especially if we're juggling important work, we've got young children, we're burning the candle at both ends. Sometimes we can't get as much sleep as we really do need. But that's okay, because there are certain seasons in our life when we can't get as much sleep as we really would like to ideally get.
And the other problem with that, Lindsay, is that most of us have to wake up to an alarm. Because you've got to be out the house, and your routine means that gets you to work at the time you're supposed to be at work. So the alarm is waking you up. I'm a zombie for the first 10 minutes, but then all of a sudden things start to kick in.
And how you feel when you wake up, that's really interesting, because if we typically wake up from a deeper part of sleep, we have sleep inertia, which is that zombie feeling that you describe. And that just because you wake up feeling like a zombie doesn't mean you haven't necessarily had enough sleep, because like you said, after sort of 10, 15 minutes, you have a cup of tea, a piece of toast, you feel, I feel awake now. It's because that sleep inertia has gone away.
Okay.
So don't judge how you think you slept based on how you feel the second you wake up, because that isn't really very helpful.
Okay, last part of the question, which Emily asked here, is, does our need for sleep change with age?
That's another great question. So typically, yes, the older we get, the recommendations are that we probably do need a little bit less sleep as we get a bit older, and that's for a few reasons. Maybe we become a little bit less physically active, and of course, if we're really physically active, we might need a bit more sleep. Babies and children need so much more sleep than we do when we get older. So for a 65-year-old, the recommendations are maybe somewhere between 7 and 8 hours is about what we would recommend. But actually, for some people, as little as 5 might be appropriate, and some might need as much as 9. So it does tend to decrease a little bit as we get older, but not hugely. But yes, don't try and mark yourself to have the same sleep you had when you were 21 if you're now 59, because you're not the same as you were back then. That's okay.
Ain't that the truth? Lindsay Browning, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on BBC Radio Bristol. Have a lovely afternoon. Thank you.
And you, thanks.
Dr Lindsay Browning there, sleep expert.